Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If this is your first time here, my name is Michael. I am now a fourth year medical student and I just finished taking my step 2 and my Comlex level 2 exams. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be going over the exam, how I studied, when I started studying, what resources I used, and some advice that I would recommend going into these exams. And I want to thank TrueLearn for sponsoring this video. TrueLearn's a phenomenal resource that I would recommend using to prepare for your Comlex Level 2, but I'm going to talk more about them later on in the video. So something that gets asked a lot is if you should take your step before Comlex, whether that's your first set of boards or your second set of boards, it's pretty much all the same. And so I'll tell you guys how I kind of went about it. So for step 1 and Comlex 1, I actually had step 1 scheduled first, followed by Comlex level 1, but I wasn't feeling really well prepared to take step 1, so I actually ended up postponing step 1 till after my Comlex level 1. And I did a whole entire video on that, and I'll link that down in the description. But for step 2 and Comlex level 2, I actually did take step 2 first, and then 10 days later, I did Comlex level 2. And I don't think it really matters the order in which you guys take these exams. As long as you guys feel comfortable with your decision and you feel well prepared for the OMM sections of Comlex level 2, I think you guys are going to be just fine. Now, a lot of people like to take their step exam and then very shortly after, like within 3 or 4 days, take their Comlex exam. And for me, I felt like I would need a lot more time to study the OMM sections for Comlex. And so that's why I spaced it out 10 days. And so up until I took step 2, I hadn't studied OMM the entire time. And so those 10 days between my step 2 and Comlex level 2 was all completely OMM. And I'm going to get into some of the best study resources for OMM so that these are easy points when you guys take your Comlex level 2. So one of the other questions you might be wondering about is when should you start studying for step 2, Comlex level 2? Because as third year medical students, you guys are going to be in the thick of doing your rotations, and you're going to be studying for your shelf exams, and that doesn't leave a lot of time to actually study very well for your board exams. And so basically what I did is similar to step 1 and Comlex level 1, I started studying for my step 2 Comlex level 2 in February. So I ended my surgical rotation at the beginning of February, and I thought that I would have more time to dedicate towards my board exams. Now, when I started studying for my board exams, I still had my internal medicine rotations, which were 2 months, and then I had my elective rotations, which were ER. And I would highly recommend, if you can, schedule your elective rotations at the end of third year, because you're not going to have any shelf exams for those rotations, which is going to free up so much time for you guys to study for these board exams. And the other nice thing was internal medicine encompasses literally everything there is in medicine. And so studying for those shelf exams actually helped prepare me for boards as well. Now, there's a key difference between your first set of boards and your second set of boards, and that's the treatment side of things. So on your first set of boards, they don't expect you to really know how to treat anything. And that's why there's a lot more pathology and microbiology and biochemistry, which there is very little on your second set of boards. It's still there, but they focus more on how to treat those diseases. What are the next best steps in treatment of your patients? What imaging do you want to order? Stuff like that. So it's very treatment oriented when it comes down to step 2 and Comlex level 2. Now, you guys probably want to know how I feel about my board exams. So really with both of them, I feel pretty fine. I don't think anybody feels great after taking a board exam. I felt like I knew at least half of the questions that were asked, and then maybe 25%, it was like between 2 different answers. And then maybe 25%, it was like up in the air, like maybe I got it right, maybe I didn't get it right. So that's kind of how I felt. And I feel like that's pretty standard amongst most students. And I want to talk a little bit more about Comlex level 2. So the exam is 9 hours. So you have 8 blocks of 44 questions. And it's a little bit different than STEP, the way in which you guys can take your breaks. So you get 60 minutes worth of break time. And you can use that 60 minutes however you guys want The only caveat is you have to always do 2 blocks of questions before you can take a break. So you have to do 44 questions and then 44 questions, and then most people will take a break at that point. I did 15 minutes at that point, and then I did my next set of 2 blocks, so 44 and 44. Then I took a 30-minute lunch. Then I did my next set of 2 blocks, another 15-minute break, which concluded my 60 minutes worth of breaks. And then I did my last 2 blocks and the test was over at that point. I thought that was a great way to take my breaks. The other cool thing is if you finish a section early, use that extra time to just sit there in your seat with your eyes closed. Use that as an unofficial break. And then when you're ready or whenever your time runs out, then you start your next section. So you actually get a little bit more break time if you finish sections a little bit early. So I told you guys when I started studying for the exam, but I didn't tell you guys how I studied, and that's super important. So I keep it extremely simple. I have a 3-step method and there's no fluff, and it worked for step 1 and Comlex 1. And so I didn't change up a thing. So the things I always recommend is you need to have a resource that offers practice questions. So you need to be doing practice questions. That needs to be your main focus and the main way you study. When you get things wrong on your practice questions, you need to have a way to revisit those topics. So whether you're writing those topics or those questions down on a Word doc or you're making flashcards, those are 2 really good methods to revisit the topics you get wrong. Finally, you need to have a resource that allows you to learn. So most people use the First Aid Step 2 book, but for Step 2, you also need to use the Step 1 book a little bit because there is, quite a bit of overlap. The Step 1 book definitely has a lot more detail, and the step 2 book is a little too vague. So you kind of need to supplement with the details that are in your step 1 book. So I'd highly recommend using those books, and then also use Dirty Medicine on YouTube. They are YouTube videos. They are very well done. And so that's what I would recommend. So practice questions, jot down the stuff you get wrong, and then review those topics through the books or YouTube videos. That's what I would recommend. A lot of people are still using like Anki and Sketchy. Those have never worked for me. I never used them, not even for my first set of boards. I didn't use them for my second set of boards. So pick some resources that are going to work for you and try not to overcomplicate it. You don't need that many resources, you guys. Now, the resource I would recommend to study OMM is TrueLearn. And TrueLearn worked for me during my Comlex level 1, and it worked really well for me for my Comlex level 2. TrueLearn's a question bank, and so it is really good at preparing you guys for the OMM section of your Comlex. And the one thing that I really love about TrueLearn is they have a feature that allows you to search for certain topics that you want to be tested on. So if you go on YouTube and watch videos from Dirty Medicine on radial head dysfunction or fibular head dysfunction or sacral somatic dysfunction, then you can use TrueLearn's search feature to search those specific topics to get practice questions on. And so when it comes down to studying for OMM, I think TrueLearn is probably the best practice question resource that you can use. I personally don't think the UWorld practice questions for OMM are going to cut it. They're just not as realistic as what you're going to see on your exam. Whereas the questions TrueLearn has, they're written by DO physicians, first of all, and they're very, very similar to the things that you're going to see on your Comlex level 2, as well as Comlex level 1. TrueLearn also has a bunch of packages that you guys can purchase for your entire 3rd year. So they have really good practice questions for your shelf exams. They have practice questions for not only the OMM section of Comlex, but just the general medicine sections of Comlex. And so if you guys have the funds and the means to invest into one of their bundles, it's definitely the most cost-effective way of going about this. They do have a specific OMM Comlex bundle that you guys can purchase. But if all else fails, guys, and you guys are just tight with cash, then definitely just get the Comlex Level 2 Smart Bank, which is going to give you all of the OMM practice that you guys are going to need to do well on your Comlex. I promise you guys, if you guys do these questions, the OMM section of your Comlex, those are going to be free points because you're going to be very well prepared. And if you guys are doing something like I did, where I literally studied OMM for 10 days and that's it, TrueLearn allows you guys to purchase these questions for different periods of time. So if you guys just want to purchase the cheapest amount of time, which is 30 days, then do it, because it's going to be definitely worth it in the end, after seeing so many ways in which they can ask you how to treat a radial head somatic dysfunction or a fibular head somatic dysfunction. And finally, if you guys do decide to use TrueLearn, then my link down below will save you guys $25. The other thing I wanted to talk about is how the first set of boards is pass-fail now, obviously, and your second set of boards is now a little bit more important. You guys might be a little bit more stressed out about taking Comlex level 2 and step 2 because you are going to get a score. And it was a little bit weird because I actually felt way more stressed about taking step 1 and Comlex level 1 than I did for my second set of boards. I actually felt fairly calm taking these set of boards, and it's probably because we've been studying and preparing for boards throughout your entire third year, whether you have realized it or not. You've been studying for your shelf exams, which are inadvertently preparing you for your board exam. And so you've been doing practice questions, you've been taking actual exams throughout your entire third year. And so coming up to your second set of boards, it's just another test, and you've already been preparing it for an entire year. So I think because of that, it was a lot less stressful. I felt probably more prepared. And on your second set of boards, there's a lot less details that you're needing to memorize. Because like I said, it's a lot of treatment-based questions, and you've been learning treatments this entire past year. And so you should feel fairly comfortable with, knowing how to treat, simple things. They're not going to ask you crazy stuff, but, an appendicitis or, a gallbladder issue. Maybe there's a stone stuck in the common bile duct causing pancreatitis, and they want to know what's the treatment for that, an ERCP. So things like that. You guys know this stuff. You've seen it. You've lived it. And so it's not as complicated as I thought step 1 and Comlex level 1 were. For example, studying all of those kidney pathologies, you may have like one question on it, and it's probably going to be like post-strep glomerulonephritis or IgA nephropathy, because they love to compare and contrast those two, which is a little bit of a hint to go and make sure you guys know the differences between those. But they're not going to ask you like the microscopic findings in any of those kidney pathologies that we all learned for step 1. You guys can kind of rest assured that you don't need to know a lot of those little details. Now, I do want to share my scores with you guys when they come out. I took Comlex level 2 about a week and a half ago, and I took my step 2 about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So my step 2 score is going to be coming out, I think, next week. My Comlex score isn't going to be coming out until August. So I'll think about, sharing those scores with you probably sometime in August once I have both of them. So if you guys have any like additional questions or want to know anything more about either step 2 or Comlex level 2 or TrueLearn or other resources that you're thinking about using, then just drop those questions down in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them for you guys. But like I said, don't stress about these board exams. I mean, they are more important than your first set of boards because you are getting a score. But like I said, you've been preparing for these exams this entire past year. And I'd be interested in knowing if those of you who've already taken your board exams, was level 2 and step 2 less stressful than step 1 and level 1? Because it kind of was for me, but I'm kind of wondering if it's the same for everyone else. So drop those questions and answers down in the comments below, and I will see you guys in another video.